So we're going to take a look at the frequently made mistakes for assignment number 3, which, as I'm sure you recall, was the fork join crawler. So without any further ado, make sure that you comment your code. A lot of people are just writing the solutions, which are problematic, whether they're right or wrong, because it's really important to document what you're doing. You can get a lot of hints for how to document them by looking at the specifications, but you really need to document the code rather than just leaving it kind of naked, just with a bunch of method calls and so on. So here's something left over from earlier. Get in the habit, please, of using a method reference wherever you can do that instead of writing out the longhand lambda expressions. It's just a good habit to get into, and you'll thank me later because your code will get a lot cleaner and shorter. Let's now start taking a look at some of the specific issues. So your factory methods should just create the appropriate object and not call fork. Fork is really something that's done in the actual code itself. If you call fork in the factory methods, then it makes it more difficult to reuse them. So we want to just create the objects appropriately. And that applies for all the various factory methods. Notice that the implementation of perform crawl is supposed to use the common pool, not a custom thread pool, not a custom fork join pool. So please make sure you follow what the specification comments are indicating. And same sort of problem here, or different sort of variant of that problem. I'm not quite sure what this is trying to do, but it's wrong. You want to use the common pool invoke method. And that's because we need to get the fork join task, need to get into the fork join task framework. And the typical way of doing that is by using a non-fork join task client like submit or invoke or so on in order to go ahead and get the ball rolling. So what you want to do there is use the common fork join pool and its invoke method to create a URL crawler task, and then go ahead and pass that in to start the wheels in motion. Yet again, another problem, don't make a custom fork join pool. You want to use the common fork join pool. So make sure you're doing that. And I guess I should also have said, make sure to use the appropriate factory method as well, rather than doing this thing with new. Okay, let's now move into some issues with the fork join, the use of the URL crawler task, which, as you can see, extends recursive task. And let's take a look at the compute method here. So first of all, make sure you document the code. There is no need to call make process image task here. I'm not sure why that was being done. I'm not sure, well, I sort of know why the invoke method was being called, sort of, because what was coming back was a fork join task, but that's completely incorrect. So you don't want to be calling invoke because you don't want to be having fork join tasks. You want to, and you don't want to be calling make process image task multiple times. You shouldn't be calling it at all. So it's just well-rounded in things not to do. And again, you shouldn't be calling invoke here because you shouldn't be dealing with recursive tasks. You should be dealing with something entirely different, which is pretty straightforward if you take a look at the code that you wrote for previous implementations of things like sequential streams. Now let's take a look at the crawl page method, which is something that's also part of this class. Once again, I'm not sure why it's calling make process image task there. That's absolutely not needed at all. And another thing to get in the habit of doing is always make sure that you use a method reference instead of a lambda expression. So you can simplify this code by using a lambda, by not using a lambda expression, but instead by using a method reference. So please get in the habit of doing that. Going a little further along, here is the process page method. So this particular method is well commented, but it's doing things incorrectly. So I'll remove the comments so they don't distract. But this code is way too complicated and doesn't need to be done in this particular way. So it should be cleaned up, and we don't have to do some of the stuff that's being shown here. And likewise, actually, I think this is probably crawl page. I think that's the name. So it's actually the crawl page method. So the code that's in the crawl page method should be calling the process page method, not implementing all the code in crawl page. That's not where it belongs. And this is just extra stuff here that doesn't need to be here. We shouldn't be calling get. We should be using or else. Again, this is very, very similar to the way the code looks in the sequential and parallel streams implementations. Now let's take a look at process page. First of all, if you're not going to use the ops array, then just go ahead and remove it. There's no need for it. If you do use it, there's some really, really cool things you can do, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. Please use the factory methods that are defined above, like make process image task or make URL crawler task here, rather than using new directly. And another thing to remember, and this is kind of left over from previous assignments as well, you need to make sure that your code has a terminal operation in it. Otherwise, the streams will never run. And so this code, for some reason, is trying to use map with forks, : add as a method reference, but there's no terminal operation, so the code will never run. And you'll get very strange errors in that case. Another little thing, this is sort of a stylistic point, but it'll make your code easier to read. You don't need to use the open curly brace stuff here. You just go ahead and use the ternary expression rather than using the open curly brace, return, blah, blah, blah. It's not wrong. It just, nobody would write code like that. It's easier to write it more concisely. Similar comment down here. There's really no reason to use a switch statement. Doesn't buy you anything. Switch statements are notoriously error prone. They're considered to be bad code smells, for example. So please use the ternary operator as an expression instead of a switch statement, because the ternary operator expression is much more concise than using a switch statement. Continuing on with process page, this is not the way to use the ops value here. So I'm not quite sure what that's trying to do, but it's not going to work. And I don't know even if it would compile, but at any rate, it's not going to work. Now, some people were very clever and they applied the ops array in various ways. This is one way to do it, but you can do it in an even cooler way that doesn't rely on using magic numbers like 1 and 0, which are very brittle because that's associated with the order in which the image and page enumeration literals are defined. You don't want to get caught wrapped around the axle of that implementation decision. So a much, much, much cooler way to do it is to say ops sub e.getType.ordinal, which will give you back 0 or 1 in this case, .apply e.fork. So that's like the super duper cool, completely abstracted way you can change the names of the enumerated types. It doesn't matter. The enumerated literals doesn't matter. Everything will work just fine. Down here, this is a simple request just to get in the habit of using method references instead of lambda expressions, just a good thing to do. And wasn't sure what was going on here. I'm not sure what join method this is actually calling. Probably a join method that you don't intend to call here from like the enclosing recursive task, maybe, but whatever it is, it's wrong. And so it's also just better to use a method reference, then this whole issue will just go away. Now let's turn our attention to some of the issues I saw in process image task. So once again, please get in the habit of using a method reference instead of a lambda expression. And also please use the find first dot or else 0 idiom we've been doing everywhere else for single element streams. Just makes it easy to tell at a glance what's going on. Here's some code for transform image. This code is too complicated. You just need to call map to int and pass in the transform image method reference. This is just way too complicated. I think it's kind of hoisting stuff from the transform image. It's doing something that you don't want to do. There's some things that are causing confusion here. And I'm also not sure why a new synchronized array was being allocated here, but it's definitely not what you want to do. Again, please use the factory method above rather than using new directly. And this particular code will never run since there's no terminal operation. Same problem we saw earlier. So make sure that you terminate your streams with something that will actually terminate them, like a terminal operator, like collect or reduce or whatever. Down here, I think you can make the code more concise by using filter and then checking to see if the result of join is returning null or not. That's a clever little way to do that. instead of using a combination of map and filter calls. Map and filter calls aren't wrong. It's just a little bit more concise to use filter by itself in that manner. And this particular call is using the wrong method. You should be using filter, not map. So if you read the specification comments above, you'll get a hint for what to do there. Let's now turn our attention to issues arising in the perform transform task method. And once again, please make sure you document your code. This code has a couple problems here. We should be calling find first as opposed to find any. Again, there's a one element stream here, so that's a good way to do it idiomatically. And secondly, I would recommend if you do things right, you should be using dot or else rather than doing this code here, which is too complicated for its own good. We don't need to do that. Let's take a look at another set of issues here. So please use filter and not map here. Not clear why this is calling make perform transform task. Don't need to do it at that point. Definitely not correct. And then I'm not sure why this code is collecting things into an array. There's no need to do that. And if you clean up that piece of the code, then this code down here will be unnecessary. So you can, again, just use the find first dot or else trick with the appropriate return value that's passed to or else. So those are some of the frequently made mistakes that I saw when I reviewed assignment 3 over the weekend. Some people did very well, great job, and I indicated as such in your code. Other people have some things to clean up. As always, please don't hesitate to ask questions on Piazza and or come to office hours and ask questions, and we'll make sure that your questions and doubts are addressed.